What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through the best quarterbacks draft strategy this season in 2024. So I'm going to be going through some of the top targets that you guys should be looking at the quarterback position, just some overall strategy guidelines, and I'm going to be going through 12 different mock drafts, so from pick 1 through 12, and just talking about how I handled the quarterback position, just kind of taking a look at how you guys can, manage that position during your fantasy football drafts. So I want to start off by talking about, I guess, like my main rule here for quarterback draft strategy for this season, and it is going to be to not reach in your drafts. I think specifically at the quarterback position, it is very, very important to wait for value this season. The quarterback position overall for fantasy is in a great place. There is so much depth. You have, a solid amount of elite high ceiling options, your high end QB1s, the Josh Allens, the Jalen Hurts. You can throw Mahomes, Lamar. I think you can make the case for a guy like Anthony Richardson. All those dudes are in the mix as potential like early/mid-round quarterback options. Then you have a nice mix of, mid-tier options, thinking more like your CJ Strouds, your Kyler Murrays. Some people would throw Dak, Burrow in that mix also. And then I think in terms of like your back-end QB1s through like your mid-tier QB2s, you have a nice mix of young up-and-coming options and then some nice veterans, your Staffords, Kirk Cousins, guys like that. So I just think this year specifically, since there is so much depth, you should not be reaching. You should let the value fall to you, because even if you're missing out on some of those early round guys, there are going to be nice options available in the later rounds for you. So now let's actually take a look at where these quarterbacks are currently being drafted, and then I'll give my thoughts on where I think they should be going, or kind of where you should be targeting taking them. So we're going to start off with the high-end QB1s, the consensus top two, and that is Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Now the ADP I got is using 4for4 ADP. It pretty much is just a combination of a ton of different fantasy football platforms trying to create consensus ADP. So that's where I got it. And on 4for4, Josh Allen is currently going off the board as a late second, and Jalen Hurts is going off the board as a mid-third. Now, personally, I am not willing to get either of these guys at their current ADP. For Josh Allen, there is no shot I'm considering him in the late second. For both these guys, they're pretty close together in my rankings. I think I actually have them back-to-back in my overall rankings. The earliest I would consider drafting these players are in the late third round, but I have them ranked as late third round picks, but the odds of me actually hitting the draft button when they're there is pretty low, because if I'm going best player available, like there are going to be players, who haven't gone off the board that I still have ranked higher than them. So my target round for Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts is like the 3-4 turn area. You're going to see in some of the mock drafts, I did end up drafting Jalen Hurts, but it was when he fell. I was not taking him at ADP in the third round. So those are the two elite options. Typically, guys, I'm not looking to target unless they are slipping, which I guess is kind of going to be the theme for a lot of these quarterbacks. Then I guess the consensus next to is Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. Patrick Mahomes is going off the board as a late third. Lamar Jackson is going off the board as an early fourth. Now, personally, I have Lamar Jackson ranked ahead of Patrick Mahomes. I just think his rushing upside gives him a much higher ceiling, so I'm not willing to draft Patrick Mahomes in the late third. I'm actually, I guess, much lower on him than consensus. I'd be targeting taking him in like the early fifth. I can't really see myself pulling the trigger on him in the fourth round, like maybe late fourth, but probably not going to fall there based on his current price. And then for Lamar, he's going off the board as an early fourth round pick. I don't think that's crazy, so I have him in yellow here. I'd prefer to take him more late fourth. I think on certain platforms he's going to fall into the fifth. Would definitely take advantage there, but early fourth round, I don't think it's the craziest price for someone with his kind of upside. Then we're kind of getting into these mid-tier quarterback ones with CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Joe Burrow. Starting off with CJ Stroud here, I am not a fan of his current price. He's going off the board as a late fourth round pick. If you have like Lamar in the fourth round, I don't think CJ Stroud should be going in the same round as someone has proven, fantasy-wise with the upside as Lamar Jackson. I'd want to take CJ Stroud probably somewhere in the mid-sixth, and I'm willing to kind of accept that I'm probably not going to have many shares of him because I don't think he's going to fall there too often. And this is not like me being against CJ Stroud as a player. He had an insanely impressive rookie season. He has Stephon Diggs added to that offense. Tank Dell should be healthy. He had an amazing rookie season. It just comes down to what his fantasy upside actually is. And in today's NFL, if you don't have that rushing upside, it's really tough to hit those peak seasons. I mean, we look at the quarterbacks going early on, right? The Josh Allens, Jalen Hurts, they provide a ton of rushing upside. Same thing with Lamar. Mahomes, he's not going to match those other guys' rushing production, but I mean, like, he's the best quarterback in the NFL, and he still gives you something on the ground. CJ Stroud really not giving you much in terms of the rushing department. So that's why I'm going to be a little bit lower on him than consensus, someone I'm not going to have a ton of shares of. Anthony Richardson, someone who I think is pretty interesting at his current price, going off the board as an early 5th rounder. My target round would be mid-5th, so not a huge difference. I definitely think he's interesting. In the 5th round, you're kind of getting a discount because he's somewhat unproven. We haven't seen him over a huge season. But like if Anthony Richardson ended up being the quarterback 1 this year, I would not be shocked. He has a great, situation around him, solid weapons, love Steichen as the head coach, good run game. We know he has that rushing upside, probably the best athlete to ever play the quarterback position. So if you're getting Richardson in the 5th, I think he's a nice target. Then we have Joe Burrow going late round 5. Not super high on Joe Burrow. I would actually target him to be like a 7th round pick. Injuries hurt him last year. I guess there's still some reason to be concerned about that wrist. And I think, kind of like I talked about with CJ Stroud, I do think Burrow has a little bit more rushing upside. I just don't think he has that like elite game-breaking fantasy ceiling. So that's why I'm lower on Burrow than consensus. Then this next chunk, we have Dak at the QB8, Kyler Murray at the QB9, Jordan Love at the QB10. So starting off with Dak here, mid-6th round ADP, not someone who I'm willing to take there. I would take him in the 8th round. And I'm not someone who's like going out here slandering Dak Prescott. He was amazing last year. He had a great season on an offense that didn't have a ton of stacked weapons. I just think he's another one of these guys. He's not going to give you a ton with the legs. And I don't know if I want to bank on him repeating his insane season last year, given the fact that these weapons, really haven't improved this season. He was so impressive last year. I just think taking him in the mid-6th, you're expecting him to just completely replicate that really strong season, and I just don't know if that's a reasonable kind of expectation. Kyler Murray is the first player where I think he is a really solid value at this point. Being drafted as the quarterback 9, late 6th round ADP, I'd target him, I guess, somewhere in the mid-6th, especially if he's going to be, falling late 6th, going into the 7th. I think he's definitely a really solid pick. In my rankings, I actually have him ahead of CJ Stroud, so that's how high I am on Kyler Murray. I guess my first, clear target. And then we have Jordan Love, mid-7th. Once again, kind of a same story here with the fact that Jordan Love just doesn't have a ton of upside. He had a great season as his first year as the starter. I like this Packers offense. He has a lot of, solid weapons to work with. This offense is definitely rising, a ton of young weapons. But I still think without that rushing upside, it's just tough to see, this pick paying off, especially when I can get guys who I think have similar ceilings 3-4 rounds later, proven options. So for my target round for Jordan Love, it would be in the 8th round. So I guess I'm not way off consensus, but he's just not someone I've seen myself drafting a ton of. And now I'd say this is where we're getting into like the late round quarterback options. So we have Brock Purdy, Jaden Daniels, Tua, Caleb Williams, and Jared Goff all within like a round and a half of each other. So Brock Purdy going late 8th. I guess I'm, slightly fading this. I take him in the 9th, but not a huge difference. Jaden Daniels going early 9th. I think he's a really nice pick in the 9th round. Rookie, not going to the best offensive situation, but his rushing just gives him such a ceiling. I think he can come in and give you solid fantasy production, even if he doesn't have a great situation around him. For Tua, not super high on Tua. I'd actually be targeting him more in like the 11th. There are just a lot of quarterbacks going after him that I'd prefer over him. Just don't think he has a ton of upside. I do think there are, some real durability concerns. And then also what happens like if a Tyreek Hill goes down. I just think he's very, very reliant on this Mike McDaniel system, the weapons he has around him. Caleb Williams going early 10th. I think he should be right in there with Jaden Daniels. He has everything around him to succeed in year 1. Also has some rushing upside. So I'd be willing to take him in the 9th. Love him if you kind of punt the position as a late round play. Jared Goff, someone I'd be looking at in the 11th. Kind of similar to Tua. Don't think the upside's there. Obviously, the weapons are solid, but he's probably maxing out at like a back-end QB1 season. And then this is like the late chunk of quarterbacks that I really, really like. You can see a lot of green here. Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford. These guys are going anywhere from like the late 10th to the late 11th. These are guys that I'm totally cool with taking in the 10th round, 11th round. If you didn't get a screaming value on some of those earlier quarterbacks, I think it's definitely fair to just double tap this tier of quarterback. Herbert Lawrence, Lawrence Kirk, whatever combination you want to make here. And then Rodgers, I feel like Rodgers is kind of on the edge of where this tier falls off. Coming off the torn Achilles, Not the greatest group of weapons around him in New York. Obviously, I still think, he's going to be very talented. He should have a decent season. But even his MVP years, right, he was putting up insane production. Without that rushing, the ceiling's not crazy. So I'm fine with him, in like the 12th round. Prefer to take him in the 13th, but it's not crazy, if you want a second quarterback there. So those are my initial thoughts on where these guys are going, where they're currently being targeted. And now let's jump into some of the mock drafts. These are actually the mocks I did for all my draft strategy videos. So we have picks 1 through 12. I guess check out those videos if you haven't seen them already. But we're going to start off here at the 101. And I mentioned how CJ Stroud was someone who I'm probably not going to have a ton of shares of. I don't think he's typically going to fall to like the late 6th. But we end up getting him here at the 6-12 on a team that already had Tank Dell. So you kind of have them stacked. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. So CJ Stroud, like I said, I kind of waited for the value. Stroud fell to me. If he went before me, I would have been fine, going late round quarterback, double tapping the position, but we didn't need to do that because we had some value fall to us here with CJ Stroud. Then looking at the 102, this is once again, we kind of went earlier round quarterback. Lamar Jackson falling to the late 4th. I think that's a really solid pick. I also realized when I was up on the clock here that since this team with the 101, they took Sam Laporta, I'd be able to stack Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews because they weren't going to take another tight end. So getting that stack, I think 2 players who are really solid values. I like the way, the quarterback position panned out in that one. This is going to be another Lamar draft. Getting Lamar late 5th when you have guys like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts going 2nd, 3rd round, I just think that's way too much of a discount. I think he's much closer to those guys than he's kind of being given credit for. And then the 104, this was a Jalen Hurts pick. So like I said, I'm probably not taking Jalen Hurts mid-3rd round, but if he's going to fall to me in the mid-4th, I'm taking it all day. Not saying that's something that's going to happen super consistently or on certain platforms, right? Sleeper, maybe he's more willing to fall than other platforms, but it's just the general idea that I want these quarterbacks falling. I'm not super huge on taking them at their current ADP. I want the players that are slipping, and if we don't get someone slipping, I'm totally fine to wait. The 5th pick was another Jalen Hurts selection, not stacked with any Eagles wide receivers. Don't really care if I'm getting them in the mid-4th round. Now here, the 6th pick, this was the first one where we kind of just punted the position. We didn't get great value, so I was fine going elsewhere. You can see we had the 607. Richardson went at the 606. If he were to fall to us, I probably would have pulled the trigger on him there, but he didn't. So, we stack up on wide receivers. We stack up on running backs. We got a nice tight end in Mark Andrews. And then I just waited. Went round 10, Trevor Lawrence. Round 12, Matthew Stafford. Those are 2 guys I really like as late round options. Prefer them over Jared Goff, Tua, who are typically going earlier on in drafts than those 2. So that was our first kind of wait at the quarterback position. We had another one of those here where we went Purdy in round 9 and then Trevor Lawrence in round 12. I liked Purdy here. I kind of have Purdy, Caleb Williams, Jane Daniels in the same tier. So I think we could have gone with Caleb Williams here. Maybe Jane Daniels was already off the board. But this was a team where I started off with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. So we were already kind of making a bet on this 49ers offense. So I'm cool getting Purdy. And then we also went with Trevor Lawrence as the second late round option. Can kind of just pick and choose the matchups with those 2. Then here with the 8th pick, this was a Anthony Richardson selection. You can see here we actually passed up on Lamar at the 406. I have Tank Dell higher in my rankings, but you could go either way. But then we end up getting Richardson falling to us at the 606. You can see CJ Stroud went at the 509. Like, there's no shot Stroud should be going pretty much like a round ahead of Anthony Richardson. I'd pretty easily take Richardson straight up, but like, there's no way I'm drafting Stroud in round 5 when I can get Richardson at the 606. So I like the way it played out there. And the next one, this was going to be another falling Jalen Hurts. So Jalen Hurts falls to the 404. That's going to be a smash pick for me every time. With the 10th pick, another one where we kind of waited at the position. We went Jane Daniels round 10, Matthew Stafford round 11. And even when I'm waiting for these late round options, I'm not getting to a spot where I'm like panicking and I'm like, in this big tier, I need to have Matthew Stafford or I need to have Trevor Lawrence. I'm fine just taking whatever one kind of falls to me in that group I talked about, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence, guys like that. I'm cool just taking the value. I'm not like, overly hyped on one of those where I'm like, I need to reach a full round to get one of those guys on my roster. Round 11, another one where we waited. Jaden Daniels, round 10. Trevor Lawrence, round 12. I guess in these, Jaden Daniels, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford, those have kind of been the guys I've been going after. I think that helps that like Tua, Goff are kind of pushed up on the sleeper ADP. Justin Herbert is someone I'm also super interested in this area. Just think he's too talented to be going so low, even if he's in a poor offensive situation. And then once again, kind of the similar mix of quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford, late round options. Maybe would have considered Anthony Richardson at the 5-12. Mark Andrews, also a screaming value there. We didn't get him to fall to us, so we wait. We hammered the other positions, and then we get those late round quarterbacks. So those are kind of like the 12 drafts, just to kind of give you guys an idea of what you can do there at the quarterback position. Now, adding on to some of the topics I talked about earlier on, where we should not be reaching at the quarterback position this year, another kind of tip that I think makes some sense is that if you're going early round quarterback, I do not think you should be drafting a quarterback 2. I know some people, they'd like to get 2 quarterbacks. They like to have, that secure option on your bench if the quarterback were to go down, or bye weeks. Personally, I just don't think it makes a ton of sense. Like I talked about with the quarterback position being so deep, even the players I didn't mention, like guys that I wouldn't feel super confident drafting as like my quarterback 2, Deshaun Watson, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, Baker Mayfield, those guys are all going outside the top 20 quarterbacks. It is not crazy to think those dudes are just sitting on waivers as like streaming options if you do need a quarterback. You have like the Steelers quarterback room with Russ and Fields. One of those guys should be fantasy relevant. Young options like Will Levis, Bryce Young, some of those guys could pan out. So I just think if you're drafting a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts, I feel like the cutoff is probably like Richardson, Stroud. Like if you're drafting Dak, Love, I guess I don't think it's crazy to draft a quarterback 2, but if you're getting, a top 6 fantasy quarterback, I just don't think it makes sense to get a second guy. I think you're better off spending that pick somewhere else, because unless you have a super deep bench, you're probably going to end up cutting that player, right? You're going to find someone on waivers. You're going to say, all right, well, this quarterback, their bye isn't until week 7, week 8, week 9. Am I going to just keep this guy on my bench? Probably not. You'll want to, just cut him, and that's a spot where you could have just, drafted a player, taken a swing on a late round option actually in your draft. And I think in other years, you could make the argument that, like, if you get a falling quarterback, you get a good price, you can draft them, and then you can flip them to a team that needs a quarterback. And I think in other years, like, that probably could have worked. I just don't think that's going to, work out this season, and it's because the quarterback position is just so deep. Like, I struggle to see people heading into the draft and leaving feeling bad about the quarterback position, because it's pretty much you get a top quarterback early on, or you snag 2 guys that you feel decent about. So getting some sort of value on like a Kirk Cousins, a Matthew Stafford, I just don't know if the market's going to be there for anyone to actually pay up. So then you might get stuck in a spot where you actually just have to keep them rostered because they're good enough, but you're not getting a ton, in terms of a return for a trade. So that's my second tip. And then I guess my third one, a little bit more minor, but it's going to be to look to stack your late round quarterbacks if possible. So if you're punting the position, you're getting the Jaden Daniels, Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams, Stafford, Lawrence, Herbert, Goff, Tua, all of those guys. If it is possible, I think it makes sense to, get the late round quarterback that connects to one of your earlier wide receiver picks. So say you drafted Drake London. Kirk Cousins is someone that you should probably be looking at the quarterback position. I kind of mentioned this earlier on, but if you're drafting, Drake London in the second round, you're already making a bet on this Falcons offense. If Drake London is hitting, having a big season, odds are Kirk Cousins is probably playing well also. Like, it'd be rare for Kirk Cousins to have a really bad season, not produce for fantasy, but Drake London's just absolutely killing it. So I think it makes sense to kind of combine those outcomes. If you're hitting on that second round pick, you're also hitting on the late round guy. But there's also not a ton of like fall off because, say you miss on the London pick, now you're like, oh great, I missed on 2 picks because if London's not playing well, Kirk Cousins probably isn't playing well, but you're going to have a second quarterback most likely if you're going late round option, so you still won't have all your eggs in one basket if you're drafting 2 later round guys. So I do think it makes sense, if you go DJ Moore, Caleb Williams could be your guy. If you're going Puka, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford could be your late round option, Lad McConkey, Justin Herbert. I just think it makes sense to kind of correlate those outcomes because like being middle of the pack doesn't get you anything, right? To win your fantasy leagues, you have to have a ceiling outcome. So I think taking the swing there on 2 guys that could, enhance each other's upside, I just think it's the smart play. So those are kind of my 3 tips, all the values. The main thing I just want to keep reiterating is please do not reach in your drafts. I'm even hesitant to take these guys at ADP because I just think you're going to find a faller somewhere, whether it's an early round option, a mid round play, and even if you don't, you're totally fine just getting 2 late round options. That's the point I want to leave you with here. But let me know your guys' thoughts. Do you enjoy these strategy videos? I'll probably also be doing ones for tight end, running back, and wide receiver. So let me know your thoughts down below. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.